Hello and welcome. You are watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, your host, and as ever I have a co-host, Mr. Mamadou Mboj. And as ever, Mr. Mboj, welcome to the program.
As ever, I'm glad to be here.
And I'm always glad that you're here. And now for viewers old and new, it doesn't take long to explain the program. It's 10 big stories from the week that we've decided you might disagree with them, but we hope you won't. And we go through them in some detail. So we hear from the president's visit to some of the OIC sites. We hear what happened when they tested fish for the pesticide Sniper. We hear what happened with the NIA 9 case. Lots of other stories, and we even go beyond our borders. We go to Mali, and we also look at the African Union and how well or not it's doing. So, shall we get going? Well, the first story, anybody who knows anything about the Gambia will know that the Gambia is going to host the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Conference at some point. Part of that means there are lots of big projects that are going around. So, this week, His Excellency the President thought, let me go and look at some of them firsthand rather than sit in my office and get reports. What did he find? Have a look.
We don't know what is responsible as of now. There are a lot of explanations, but I think technicians should sit around the table with government to discuss this with our technicians also, and look at what are the problems. But there is a problem.
He also reveals he has summoned the contractors to an emergency meeting at his office on Friday and wants serious work to commence immediately.
There we heard His Excellency the President there. He gave the thumbs up to some of the projects, the VVIP Lounge, but there were other projects that he was not happy about, Mr. Mboj. And of course, we've seen this sort of thing before where a president or head of a country, head of state goes around and looks at projects, developmental projects. But this time, he didn't just go around and sort of give plus or minus marks. He called them to an emergency meeting the following day.
Absolutely. And the way you put it there, at some point,
Yeah.
we are going to host it. That was a killer.
For sure, for sure. I don't dare put a date on it now. But, yeah.
Oh, yes. Remember, it was in the first. On a good number, few occasions, he had gone out to see what was going on.
That's correct. Yes.
I think the last time we discussed that, that outing, as it were,
yeah.
then when he expressed some satisfaction over the pace, the progress of work, we thought,
Yes, because for those of us who live in or near some of these places, we were a bit skeptical. But this time, the skepticism has come from the president himself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what next?
Yes.
For me, I don't even want to dwell on it. Absolutely.
Sure.
Dissatisfied. He's not happy with the pace of what's going on, especially in some areas. I think apparently Karaba Avenue, Banjul, Serekunda Highway, as it were.
That's right.
Not very happy with that one.
Quite.
Granted. So what next?
Yes, because it called the contractors and all various concerned parties to this conference. It was not a conference, a meeting behind closed doors. So we don't actually know what's happening. But he didn't mince his words, and he didn't hide his disappointment. He didn't kind of give it any gloss over. He said, I'm not happy. He said, and this is too slow, and I need answers. I mean, that's the kind of thing we want to hear, I guess.
Absolutely. And he said he didn't know why, and so when they're asking him, why do you think, what do you attribute the slow pace of things? He said, they will look into it.
Yeah,
He
sure.
called them to a meeting.
Yeah, because I live on Coastal Road, and one of the roads being done is the airport Coastal Road along the Bertil Harding Highway. We were a bit surprised that they hadn't started, say, January. I think it was April that they started on that particular stretch of the road, and we thought, you've got great weather, why not start now? And so beat the rain season to it. And now they've been a bit lucky because in that area, we've not had a lot of terrible rain, really.
I have to be honest with you, Ade. I would love to ask the president, what do you think has changed? From the last time you made that round, you came and expressed some satisfaction.
Sure.
What do you think has changed between then and now?
Yes,
as
indeed.
it were.
Yes.
It's going to be very difficult on him. We all know that.
Sure.
Do I have my benchmarks? Do we have a timeline? One understands that planning for these things, they're extremely difficult.
Of course.
We always talk about the shortcomings of our institutions. We talk about the personnel, the incapacity in terms of personnel, or money, or this or that. One knows all of that. We hope that these things could be factored into our planning. Can we have a realistic date? given the difficulty of the
And
circumstances.
those are all quite reasonable questions, because if you take, just as a straw poll, we spoke to our neighbours. As I said, I live on Coastal Road, and we spoke to our neighbours, and again, I've mentioned this before, how do you feel about it? They're willing to put up with all the discomfort because they see the bigger picture. They see the long-term vision that this is something that, will be a game changer, when it comes and when it's finally done. It'll make a huge difference in their lives. So people are willing to put, so you already have the public on your side. Keep them better informed. And as you say, what are your expectations? What are your timelines? And have you given them timelines by which they have to do certain things?
That's it. It's all being realistic and communicating to people, just being honest. I think people can understand that in any time. We also know that with the 5-star hotel, that land, is in controversy, isn't it? So how are we going to handle that? So we understand the difficulties, the problems, the challenges that we face, but communicate with us honestly.
That's it.
Realistically, what do we expect? Yeah, they will keep on telling you that there are other countries who have in the past sort of had to defer these things. Granted, we understand all of that. So now, honestly, what is realistic for us? What should we expect in the soonest?
And using expect, I think expectations have been raised by this meeting that he's called, because already people were asking me, do you know what the results of the meeting were? Well, at the moment, I don't know. Certainly not by the time we went to broadcast this. I don't know, but perhaps we will find out later today or in the next few days.
Absolutely. And we also hope that he's learned something else. I have some confidence in him. I have to say that.
Sure.
Once he made his appointments with the new cabinet.
Yes.
And the tone, the language, that sense of urgency. And that seriousness. Let's stop the politicking.
Sure.
Things are not really going well. So do we confront that sort of honestly? So I have some confidence.
Sure.
So we will see how it goes.
We will see how it goes. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us on to our next story. Not sure it's quite linked, but leading up to the National Assembly elections, I was one of those who expressed some qualms about some of the people who were putting themselves up for election. And so I was really, really pleased when I heard that there was induction of quite some depth for the new National Assembly members. Well, we have a visitor who's also here to help us with our National Assembly members, none other than former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan. Have a look.
Is provided in accordance with the will of the people. However, a fairly new assembly, with the majority being first-time parliamentarians, without capacity might become a challenging and complex landscape to navigate, making it difficult for Parliament to deliver accountability. The Executive Director of the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, Anne Lionu.
Yes, I mean, I was hoping to hear there from Goodluck Jonathan what we heard from our colleague Omar P. Jallow, and they were talking about, I think you were the one who told me, I think 37% are new. They're newbies, so these are new people, newly elected to the National Assembly, and they
actually 37 retained.
Is that right?
Yeah, you have more who are newbies.
Right.
So 33 out of the 53 were new.
New.
Only 20.
This is it.
So 20 is about 30-something%, isn't it? Really, given 53.
Yes.
Absolutely. So the similar thing in Nigeria, he said.
Yes. Well, this is it. And Goodluck Jonathan was saying that, even a country like his own, Nigeria, which has had several military coups, they still value the civilian, legislature because they are directly elected by the people. And so, I guess the point I'm trying to get to is that one can never have too much of this sort of training for National Assembly members because for many of them, it's new to them.
Absolutely, that's one factor. We also had a platform of debates during the National Assembly.
That's true.
So, and some of us, we could judge, we could make certain judgments of the caliber of people we have in there. You've got some experienced hands in there, granted, but most of them really never had the kind of life experiences, as it were, for you to go into Parliament and perform well. I mean, I have to be honest with you, I would expect somebody to have this, I don't know, 20, 25 years doing things.
Yes, yes,
working,
before you
career,
presented yourself.
doing things before I joined the National Assembly. This is what we see in
other
developed
countries,
parts of the
of
world,
course, yes.
in all of that. But still, this is what we have.
Yes.
Granted, we've had help from the Commonwealth
Yeah.
when they brought in British MPs and
Yeah.
others. They're helping to build the capacity. But we all know that these things are merely sort of triggers. Most
Yes,
of the work you're going to have to
to
do
do it ourselves.
yourself.
Absolutely
Yeah,
true.
nobody's going to be there.
Correct.
It's just
Yes.
introductory stuff.
Well, this is it, because the one with the British MPs, they focus particularly on select committees and how people should use select committees. Although, to give them their due, in the previous parliament, the select committees did a pretty decent job of holding to account ministries and government directorates. So perhaps that's something, but when you lose that number of people and you have fresh people come in, then they need to learn the ropes all over again. So I was quite pleased about that, because select committees have a really crucial role to play.
Absolutely. How many times on our program, Drive Time, the one on radio, we would go to their findings and really push things. We need, they're a hugely significant institution, obviously.
Sure.
So, yes, we need that. But the training, the experience you need, really. We all know that. For instance, when I question a minister or a managing director, whoever, I have to be very sharp to get at what I need to get.
Yeah, of course.
So I need that experience,
Yes.
So I will get that introductory stuff.
Sure.
Fine, fantastic. But most of the work afterwards, I'm going to have to do myself.
Sure. And for me, the reason I've welcomed it is because, as I'd said time and time again, both on radio, TV, and on social media, when I watched some of the debates and I heard some of the prospective National Assembly members saying what they were going to do once and if they got in, and I thought, the law doesn't allow you to do that. Surely you must know that. So I was a bit concerned that these people are putting themselves up and they didn't seem to know the limits or the limitations of the job that they were going for effectively.
So one would hope that with this training, that would adjust
Yes.
their
Yes.
perspective,
Indeed.
adjust their expectations.
Sure.
So I'm willing to sort of take what they were saying during the campaigns. I'm willing to forgive them.
Yes, indeed.
The pressures of elections. You will promise all sorts of things.
As
You
people
will promise
do.
your
As
parents.
people do. As people do.
So
Right.
I'm willing to
Sure.
forget all of that. So now focus on what is it that you can achieve? What is achievable? Very simple question. What
Yeah.
is achievable? We all know the situation we are in is not going to be much.
This is it. That's true. Thank you for that, Mr. Mbodj. And that takes us on to our third story. Now, there'd been rumors, and I have to be honest, I'm one of these who I dismissed these rumors, people saying this pesticide, Sniper, was being found in, or being used rather, to dry and smoke fish. Yes, honestly. So what happened? Well, the food standards people decided to send some samples of fish for testing. What did they find? Have a look, have a listen.
The Director General of the Food Safety and Quality Authority reads a joint statement on the outcome of the investigation.
From the main sample, which is the 57, 11 fish samples were randomly selected as subsample for analysis at Ceres Lacostox Laboratory in Dakar, Senegal, to determine the presence of pesticides. The results of the analysis indicated the presence of Sniper, which is the active ingredient, dichlorvos, and 4 other insecticide products, namely permethrin, abamectin, cypermethrin, and bifenthrin.
At this point, you're all running to your internet search engines to find out what these horrible pesticides are, or you're deciding that you're going to go vegetarian. Mr. Mbodj, as I said, I was one who I kind of poo-pooed the thing. I said, oh, people love these kind of rumors about Sniper being used. But although it's not 100% conclusive, it's certainly, they found significant traces of it in there, and quite shocking.
When we first heard this, I was also staggered. I said, certainly not. What purpose would that serve?
Yes.
What's the point of doing it?
I was even defending one of the fisher women who said, we eat this stuff too. Do you think we're going to use it if, but yeah.
So many of us, we do things that we really shouldn't do. That's
Right.
bad for us.
Sure,
So
sure.
he doesn't.
So once you've gotten over your skepticism, what then?
Then remember, we discussed this on the drive time.
Yes.
I went around researching
Mhm.
what is this pesticides and the fish.
Yeah, that's right. The dried fish,
The
small
dried fish. And then I
sniper.
realized that there was talk of that in Nigeria, in
Yeah.
Ghana,
Right.
in
right.
other African countries.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's nothing new.
It's not
This
new,
was
yes.
really what we said.
Yes.
Then we said, okay, let's just wait and see.
Yes.
So once they came, they confirmed. I said, I'm not surprised.
Because
I am not surprised.
what was interesting is that the FSQA, the standards agency, food standards agency, once they'd gone round and they'd seen hundreds of discarded sniper bottles, and they'd asked the women, so why have you got all these bottles here if you're not, and they're like, well, we don't know. But they thought, okay, well, you can tell us that, but we'll do our own investigation. And so they sent the samples off, as we heard there, to Dakar. And they came back, and people's worst fears were concerned. And since we did the news report, I've seen people posting on social media, they're not going to eat fish anymore and so on. So it's been quite scary that to have it confirmed, because, as I said, it had been a rumor, and some people were able to bat away the rumors. But now the worst fears have been confirmed. And now what's going to be done about it, I guess, is the question.
That's it.
Yeah.
And when we listen to them, you see, I was listening to the witnesses, people that spoke to our reporter,
Yeah.
people we interviewed, and what you could get, there was a denial, but the denial was so restricted. Oh, I don't do it.
I don't do it.
See, I was
I've
listening
heard
between the lines. I was
this.
trying to read between the
You
lines.
had people saying, I've heard the rumor,
I said,
but I don't do it.
I don't do it, and I thought I'm
Right.
not convinced. I wasn't,
Yeah, right.
persuaded by that. And it seems that this wasn't an aberration.
No, quite.
Just one or two places.
No.
Bakau, Brufut,
Yeah.
Bujur, Banjul, Katong, Tanje, Sanyang.
This is it.
It's a regular
Now,
practice.
had it been one place,
Oh, yes.
then you would have thought, so, 7 landing sites,
Mm-hmm.
9 markets, and, 57 bits of evidence were sort of catered. So they went into some detail to try and get. I mean, initially they were sort of couching, saying, we don't want, but I said to them, but you talk the places you've just named, it's not just 1 or 2 places that you found this, and it's not as if you find it in some and not in others. So it seems as if it had become the norm, that in all these places this was used to treat. We know that, they need to keep insects off it, but to actually smear the stuff onto the fish that people eat I think that was the shocker. Really.
Absolutely. So, and you've got that the right movement in our thought. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
So the punitive elements, we tend to do that. Are we going to punish anybody? Possibly not. But there's a problem.
Sure.
There's a social problem. So how do I engage with these people?
Sure.
I know what you want to do. What's the purpose? What's the thinking behind it?
Sure.
How can I help you with providing you with alternatives?
Quite.
Yeah,
Right.
one. How do we change attitudes? Because in the longer term, this is what I want.
Yes.
Always we talk about our institutions. The punitive elements,
Sure.
you do something wrong, we punish you. We need that, but we also need the facilitative elements.
So this is it, and I absolutely agree with you there. And the sort of additional thing with sniper is that it's not just any pesticide; it's one that's now been banned. Okay, so but interestingly, when we discussed this in the office 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, whatever it was, not in relation to the fish necessarily, but the ban, several people in the office admitted to using it, saying that, once we sprayed the house, we had to go and stay somewhere else for a couple of days because it was so pungent, but it was so effective. And so the kind of effectiveness of it is why people still use it. And so when I first heard it, I thought, well, maybe they're just spraying it around where they keep the fish to keep, but apparently it's a bit more sinister than that.
Absolutely.
That, they might have been sort of smearing it on to keep the insects off the fish rather than keep them away from where the fish is kept.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I heard that discussion in the office.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So which led me to something else. when I say effective, what exactly do I mean? Fine, it will kill this stuff.
Yes.
But what about us? What's the effect on us?
Ingesting.
That's it, ingesting it.
Yeah.
So the way I should measure effectiveness, and we heard these things from people we thought had some education.
Indeed.
I'm sorry that I have to say this, but I'm going to say it.
No.
That's
I mean, some of our educated colleagues were
So-called
saying it.
educated colleagues.
Go on.
How do I measure effectiveness?
Sure.
And this is when we say somebody's educated, this is the sort of question I would expect somebody to ask. This is why I want to make a distinction between educated and certificated, that sort of thing.
Indeed, yes.
Absolutely. So this is it. There must be a certain engagement. Civil society, government, we keep on saying this. Yes, it's a slow process, but this is what we have.
Yes.
You build democracy by civil society engaging. So we'll engage and try to see how you can bring reason.
Yeah,
I think
because somebody's importing this stuff, somebody's selling it. So, what do you do to the people who are importing it, and how do you stop it? And also the ones who are selling it, how do you stop them? And, what are the punitive measures that you have to take to send a message that this has to stop?
Absolutely. The big ones.
Yeah.
You see,
Right.
you just imagine.
Yes.
You see, in drugs, we've seen this.
Yeah,
The
quite.
big ones are really very difficult to catch.
This is
So
it.
in the
You
end,
catch the
we
small-
go to the small fish.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
But you got
This
the
is it.
small fish. Yeah.
So this is the key.
Right.
So when we say that we've banned it, anybody who brings it in, oh my God, the
Clamp it.
hammers, I will slam the
Absolutely.
law,
Sure.
as it were, on you,
Sure.
and see how I can help the small fish, as it were,
Sure.
change your attitude.
Sure.
I know what you want to do. Now, this is an alternative. You will have the same effects, less
Less.
of the damage.
Sure. I think that's what we need. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboge. And as we've said in this discussion, it's a case of what next. So I think everybody's waiting with bated breath to see what the FSQA decide to do in terms of the remedy, because these people have to have an alternative. So thank you for that, Mr. Mboge. And now on to a really, really big story. I'm not saying the others are not big, but this one, a murder trial plus torture of people, and this one had gone on for 5 years. Finally, this week, there was a verdict. And what a verdict. Have a look.
For us to speak is the former NIA DG, Yanko Babaye, who said, and I quote, "Your lady," referring to the judge, "I beg for your mercy on your sentence. As you can see, all of us are with family, with small children. I beg for you to have mercy on your sentence." End of quote. Ending his statement, Baji breaks down in tears. This was the common statement from the other convicts, all of whom pleaded not guilty throughout the 5-year-long trial. Following the appeal for clemency, the prosecution congratulates the judge for the historic judgment, saying that the law has taken its course, adding that everything is now in the hands of the judge to finally decide. It was at this juncture that Justice Kumbasila Kamara refers to the Constitution, which holds that it is mandatory for a person convicted of murder to be sentenced to death.
To be sentenced to death. Now, Mr. Mboge, of course, we know the death penalty has not been carried out. There's a moratorium here in the Gambia for which the country has been praised. And again, you and I discussed this because our colleague Choi, he was there in the court, and he said, and this wasn't just a kind of personal view, even though everybody in the court knows that they've not carried out a death sentence, to hear the words said actually sent a chill through people, that the Justice Kumbasila Kamara said, "I am duty bound by the Constitution to tell you that because you've been convicted of murder, the sentence is death." And to hear those words was quite a shock. But also, if we look at the case, people have said all along, this is one of the first big cases to have come out of the whole Jammeh era and its misdeeds, shall we put it that way. In that regard, what were your views when you heard the thing? And finally, after 5 years, a verdict.
When I heard the death sentence, just as they did with Yankuba Toure, isn't it? I heard thunder. It's a poignant moment.
Yeah, quite.
It reverberated.
Yeah.
Because with me, I can remember April 16th as if it happened yesterday.
Right.
You know, when Solo Sandeng died, and then afterwards UDP came out, Dava and others.
Saying we want the body,
Dead
dead or
or
alive. Yes.
I was working at QIT, where
Right.
FIB building was.
Right.
Well, what we used to call FIB building, I suppose we still call it that.
Yeah.
And everything just happened right there.
Right.
Nobody told us about it. We saw
Sure.
naked power,
Yeah.
extraordinary stuff. For us to see today, those people who were heavily involved in it,
Sure.
to the extent of killing somebody who was protesting to have electoral reform.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
Quite
When you
remarkable.
see them today convicted, or everybody should take note,
Sure. Sure.
stand back and be very careful. As we often say, the arc of history
Yes.
may
indeed.
be long,
Yes, yes.
but it bends towards
It's
justice.
absolutely true.
Extraordinary.
Absolutely true, and this is the manifestation of it, because again, Choi was saying that, you know, when they got up and we heard them all pleading one by one and breaking down into tears, he said even some people who had kind of wanted them convicted felt a twinge. It's a kind of human sentiment. If you see somebody crying, you feel some sort of empathy with them. And yet, these were the people who they pleaded not guilty, and they were obstructive to the case right to the end until they knew that they had been found guilty and sentence was going to be passed on. Then suddenly they were contrite and they were asking for clemency.
That's it.
I mean, all the bravado was gone, and now we heard people pleading, begging. We all have families, we all have young children. Have mercy on us. So quite a flip, quite a change.
That's the gut-wrenching stuff. The stuff that really sticks in the gut.
Yeah,
We've got this Truth Commission,
yeah, sure,
and being honest, you know, to contrite,
sure,
one, and to be open to say things as they were.
sure, sure.
Maybe,
Yeah,
you know, it's easier for me when you do that, for me to show some clemency.
sure.
But they fought for everything throughout the way.
Every inch.
Every inch of the way.
Sure.
This so-called plea of mitigation, isn't that
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they call it essentially, after they had been defeated.
Yeah,
In many ways, they
Yeah.
realized after they had been defeated.
sure.
All the same, we have put a moratorium on the death penalty.
Sure, sure.
You're going to go and serve life? Well, this is what the law says.
Sure.
This is the nature of justice.
Sure.
And everybody else take note.
Sure.
We are in a transition. So this is really what it means. It's a transitional justice
It's a crucial case.
process. It's a crucial, highly crucial case.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And there are others around
Indeed.
by law connected to
Yeah.
it. All
Korea.
of the Jamaica stuff.
Yeah.
Korea over there in
In
America.
America.
Some in Switzerland, we
Sure.
do not know yet. And here as well, the government-wide paper, the implementation.
That's right.
So there's so much we need to do. But a hugely historic moment.
Sure, for sure. And one that will reverberate down the years, I'm sure. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And takes us on to halfway through, which is our fifth story. And of course, for those of us who work here, some of us worked, including on Eid, and on the Monday that was supposedly a public holiday. What's a public holiday? Anyway, a lot of people I've learned since I came to the Gambia have their towns of origin or villages of origin, and they go away. And as we come to the weekend after Eid, a lot of people have not come back, and it has impacted businesses somewhat. Have a look.
If one is smart, it's during this period you can make more money before other shop owners return. As you can see, I have just sold some items and I'm able to earn something. And business is all about talent.
Serekunda Market is said to be the Gambia's busiest commercial center, as many come from afar to earn a living there. But during this period, one could walk for minutes without bumping into anyone. From Serekunda Market, we drove along both the Tipper Garage and Manjai Highway. These roads are usually congested with motorists, wheelbarrow pushers, and pedestrians. But today, the streets look almost empty.
Streets almost empty, market almost empty, as our colleague Lolly M. Kamara said there. You could walk through the market without bumping into anybody, which is an impossibility in what I would call normal times, Mr. Mboj. And what struck me is that, again, I mentioned I live on Coastal Road. A lot of the shops there almost a week on, have still not opened, because I'm told that the people have not come back yet. And so I see it also every morning when I'm going along. My colleague Abdul Sise can confirm this. We have an almost smooth ride from Coastal Road all the way to Kairaba Avenue because there's not a lot of traffic. This for me, it's a surprise. I was trying to recall about a year ago whether this was the situation, and this time it seems to have gone on a bit longer, this kind of slow return to work. What's the norm here?
I am of an age that should be used to this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We've seen it, so one can question the scale, the gravity. Is it more this year? Well, I didn't know. It's a matter of whether it's more. We've had a more sustained, more prolonged period. Maybe. We'll have to look into that. We'll have to look into that. But we know that during Eid, be it Korite or Tobaski, people tend to go to their villages,
including
to places
some
of birth, as it were, including some of our colleagues. Sure. That is really what happens. Sure. We've even heard some people blaming, saying that, oh, you have these foreigners, as if I did, maybe, or something like that. Because so they've all gone.
Because I think the day after, people were finding it hard to get bread. And so they were saying, oh, these Senegalese bakers, they've gone to Senegal and they haven't come back. But it turns out not to be the case. But that persists, that myth goes on.
This is what happens. And the gentleman there, the reporter was talking to, saying that this isn't the time that you should take
an opportunity. Yeah,
absolutely
brilliant.
But for urbanites, because you know that business, that commercial advantage. Well, for others there are other considerations. Sure. You know what I mean?
Some of the colleagues who have come back and some of the ones who haven't come back, and they've said to me the time they spent with family has been beyond precious, and they've really, to them, that's been the most important thing. And they've really loved it.
That's it. So those considerations for many people, they are more important than the commercial advantage.
Indeed, sure.
Okay, why not now the urbanites we live around? I know that prayer time, this is what's going to happen. What is it that entrepreneurially I can do perhaps to fill in?
Well, this is it.
How can I make a killing for just 1 week? You know, you have all of these middlemen, don't you?
That's right.
You know, they do all sorts of things. So that's it. For people like that and many others within the urban, opportunity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What can I do within 1 week?
And
make a killing? I don't know.
That's
but look into it, you might find something.
Sure. Opportunity knocks.
Opportunity knocks.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboja. And that takes us nicely onto a break. And after this break, we'll come back. We will have 5 more stories, so don't go away.
Have you been looking for the perfect indoor router with long-range Wi-Fi coverage and faster internet speed connecting all your smart devices? Well, we present to you the QCell Indoor Router, a router that has all you need and much more. For just $4,275, you can get 4G plus internet speed, wide coverage, and connect up to 15 devices. And that's not all. The indoor router can be used for both office and home needs. So, enhance your internet experience with our indoor router. For more info, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Sunubus, we innovate, others follow.
The Gambia OIC Secretariat, in collaboration with the Office of the President and Imogam Hotels and Resorts, wishes to invite the general public to the foundation stone laying of a 5-star Radisson Blu Hotel by the President of the Republic of the Gambia, His Excellency Adama Barrow, on Saturday, 23rd July 2022 at 4 p.m. The construction of a 5-star hotel is one of the key priority projects in preparation for the forthcoming OIC Heads of States and Government Summit. The hotel will have 400 rooms, including 60 presidential and royal suites. The 5-star hotel will ensure the guests receive a befitting accommodation experience. Additionally, it will diversify our tourism portfolio by providing luxurious accommodation facilities for high-end tourists. Let's come out and support this massive development.
Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm Adi Darami and I have here Mr. Mamadou Mbodj. Mr. Mbodj, thank you for your interventions and interjections so far.
Cheers, Adi.
Thank you. And anybody who's missed the previous 5, don't worry. We've got some fantastic 5 more stories to go, so don't worry, okay? Now, July 2002, it was announced that we wouldn't have the OAU anymore, the Organization of African Unity. We would have something called the African Union. Well, we had a look at the African Union turning 20 and we wondered, how have they done? We marked their scorecard. Have a look.
The organization has been praised for its role in coordinating the continent's pandemic response and lobbying for vaccine access and COVID-19 debt relief. In trade, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement was created to create a single market for goods and services, expected to boost intra-Africa trade by about $35 billion.
Our colleague there, you heard there, Ajibintu Drame. Mr. Mbodj, the African Union, you know, anytime Africans get together, they're either discussing politics in their own country, or if they're talking on the kind of continental scale, it's the African Union, its successes and its failures. But every time somebody mentions it anyway, and people take sides. I'm not asking you to take sides, but just, I said we marked their scorecard and we mentioned some of the successes, and I just wondered what your view is of some of the successes of the African Union, and we can get on to possibly the failures later.
Absolutely. This is we said with these things. There was a time when we sounded so censorious, but afterwards we begin to realize that no, that's not what is required here. Some kind of understanding is required here. Neither demonology nor hagiography.
Indeed, yes.
Isn't it?
Quite.
So this platform was always really a very important platform from the days of when it was the OAU.
Indeed.
You had these societies that we were battered, for God's sake. This is exactly what I'm going to use, what our poet, Melody Peters, called the massacre of the soul.
Sure.
So now we have to come and form nations and have all of these transnational organizations and chart our way forward.
Sure.
So the purpose, the work was always going to be different.
Of course, of course.
So that's it. They saw us through independence of
Indeed,
countries.
Yes.
The last one, South Africa. So that's it. So we want them to do the big stuff.
Yes.
Nation building.
Sure.
But we all know that within each national territory, there's so much that you need to do.
This is it. This is it. And for me, that's always been the difficulty of them trying to achieve, you know, what the grand vision. Yes. You know, they now talk about Vision 2063 and so on. But for me, a lot of the even smaller things, they've not really achieved. We talk about, you know, them getting, you know, vaccines for Africa and lobbying and so on. But even that is a kind of half a success, because once they gotten the vaccines, they didn't do a good job of kind of selling the idea to Africans that they should get vaccinated. So you have huge swathes of the continent still unvaccinated, which may or may not be a good thing. But they weren't good enough in the persuasion element of it, were they?
Absolutely. I mean, we are all really trying to get the governance that we are told within the national borders. Once you begin to have that, then maybe as a transnational organization it will begin to work. I mean, we've been following the EU as a parallel, isn't it?
Sure.
From EEC, then EU, and all of these things.
Yes.
But again, when you look at their journey, you contrast the two, you realize that we have a bit more work to do.
Sure.
As I keep telling people, I said, the Rome Statute, what was it, 53, something
well,
like
that's
that?
Right, yes.
I said, you think that was the beginning of the European Union? The European Union can be found in the writings of Erasmus, going back,
way back.
Education, all Latin, all of the elites in Europe were learning similar things.
That's right.
So politics caught on late.
Sure. But you made a very valid point the other day, and I think it was why we were discussing it on Drive Time, possibly. And you mentioned that even with the European Union, Not every European country is a member.
Apparently there are 44 European countries.
And
only 27
are.
or 28.
That's
you,
right.
you see how it works.
That's
But
right.
with us, for political reasons, we want everybody to be to be on board.
Indeed, yes.
I'm fearful. I have this fear
Sure.
that sooner or later that will break up.
Well, Morocco pulled
fear.
out, didn't they?
Yeah. The more progressive ones
Yes.
will start forming ourselves into groupings.
That's right.
That's my suspicion.
Yes, although
You
Morocco
cannot-
pulled out because of the Western Sahara
That sort of
thing. Yes, yes. But you're right. There is the danger, and you know, people are bored of hearing me talk about Cape Verde. But about 10 years ago, Cape Verde became so frustrated with ECOWAS and the AU, they applied to join the EU.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how ridiculous it got. Of course, they were rejected, although they were given a kind of special status because of the strides that they were making. But that sort of thing could happen again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, I suspect, you're going to have this group of more progressive countries. They really want to do stuff.
They'll band together.
Yeah, they'll band
and
together.
move.
They're not going to allow others who are dragging their feet to drag them as well.
That's
so
the very
my
phrase,
suspicion
drag them,
is
yeah.
that this will break up.
Sure, sure.
Then, now with the EU, you just can't come and apply and say, I want to join, and they say, okay, we are all Europeans coming.
Yeah, yeah.
Economically,
That's
socially,
right. That's right.
whatever. There are
You
certain
have to
criteria.
meet, that's it.
Yeah, I don't have to meet any criteria.
I just have to be on the African
it's just
continent.
a continental definition.
Yeah,
that must move on to ideas.
Sure.
That would, you know, to ideas
I
and
think,
vision.
Yes.
It has to.
And I think that's where it's going to go, because as you rightly say, the more progressive, the sort of 8 or 10 progressive countries will say, you know what, we're moving on, we're being held back by the rest of them. Why don't we form our gang of 8 or 10? Collaborate and cooperate and move on and leave the rest behind. And it's a real danger.
The Super League, Premiership, Super League.
It's that kind of way.
I suspect that organizations, groups tend to do that.
Sure.
So that will happen. So I just worry. Little Gambia, where would we fit in?
Well.
How would we perform?
Sure.
What will happen? What is our strategic interests? I keep asking all of these questions. We are so small. You don't have much bargaining power.
Sure.
How do you negotiate yourself around these things so that the bigger nations wouldn't take advantage of you?
Indeed.
We all remember Margaret Thatcher, Maastricht Treaty, during those periods, how she was fighting for Britain.
Sure.
And this is what happens.
Sure.
It's never a win-win situation.
It never is.
That's not true.
Sure.
How do you negotiate, fight for your interests, given your size, you don't have much voice?
Sure.
That's my biggest fear.
It's a huge fear. And it reminds me of people talking about is the glass half empty or half full. We had a boss who tried to use it, but he hadn't quite read into it deeply enough. And so when he asked me the question, I said, well, it depends. He said, what do you mean it depends? I said, well, if a minute before I came into this room, it was full and you drank out of it, it's half empty. I said, however, if a minute before I came in, it was empty and you filled it halfway, it's half full.
Fantastic.
He didn't know where to go with that.
Fantastic, but that's what it is.
But
it depends.
It depends.
You have to contextualize.
You have to put in context.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Thank you. And that takes us on to our seventh story, bioinformatics. And it's kind of linked to something we just mentioned, which is about, COVID vaccines and so on. And it's about doing our own testing here in Africa. Have a look.
Bioinformatics training cannot be overemphasized. This training is very important. People who are skilled in bioinformatics are very scarce, not only in my country, but in the sub-African region. So this is very important because we know as a continent, we are faced with various challenges, challenges that are posed by diseases that are of public health concern.
We heard the participant there from Sierra Leone. And we had people from Togo, Gambia, etc., etc. You probably have the list, Mr. Mboj. I don't have it to hand, and I'm trying to remember all the 7 countries that were involved. But on the serious aspect of it, bioinformatics, crucial that we are able to do these kind of sequencings for ourselves, and not saying, oh, we're going to have to send these samples to Europe and so on. It seems almost too obvious that this is something we should do and should have been doing a long time ago.
Remember when we were told about COVID-19? So the testing, we really didn't have the laboratories that could do this test.
This is it.
What was in the news? Senegal could do it, and South Africa.
South Africa.
We thought that surely cannot be.
This is it. And then later on
Surely
Nigeria,
not
and then Ghana.
later on, that
But
was it.
later
Exactly.
in the thing.
So the pressure
Yes, correct.
of the situation really forced that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the blessing in disguise.
Sure, sure.
This thing, the
It's forced
COVID-19,
us to kind of, it's been an
exposed so
eye-opener.
much.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. So here what do we have? From what, 10 ECOWAS?
That's
Is
right.
what it says, yes? 10
Yes.
ECOWAS
Countries,
15
yes.
laboratories,
Yes.
as it were.
That's right.
Laboratory scientists.
Scientists.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All over. And when we discussed it on Drive Time, we said, of course.
You know, why not?
Epidemics and all of these, they don't respect borders.
They do not.
So that's it.
And then you have, and we use the analogy of, or the example, I should say, of the Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia one, the Ebola one.
Yes.
What's the use of sending stuff to England when it's affecting Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia?
Absolutely.
Why don't those countries have their own labs where they can test and very, very quickly come to some sort of decision and share the information? And this is what this is all about.
Absolutely. And when we look at the wider context, scientists have been saying for a while that we'll be having more epidemics.
Sure.
You know, perhaps one of the costs, one of the consequences of globalization.
Indeed.
Isn't it? SARS,
Yeah.
MERS,
Sure. Yes.
and all of this before finally we have this one. That's it. So we know these things will be happening. It's fantastic. So we need to train more of these people because this is going to be a threat in the future.
And I
that much
think-
we know.
And this is it, and the crucial point there is that we can't take the kind of drastic step that was taken in the early days of COVID-19, where flights were grounded for several months, schools were shut across the world. I mean, that really, it was drastic. It was now being seen as something of an overreaction. But we can't have that kind of overreaction again because, and the reason we can't is that if we are better informed, then we can make better decisions.
That's it.
Sure.
So we need to be more proactive.
Indeed.
So the whole thing about bioinformatics, isn't it? Is about using computer technology.
Indeed.
Collate, analyze,
This
do
is
what,
it.
you know what they
And
do,
disseminate
as it were,
or share.
disseminate the information
This
which
is
we
it.
did. So absolutely, and we were told one of the participants, the guy, was it Sidibe?
Yes,
we
yes, Sidibe.
interviewed,
yes.
and saying that we don't offer that course here.
This is it. Yeah.
And we need that.
And we need to
knowledge.
do it.
So
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will try
That's
to
right.
incorporate that.
Let's
maybe,
hope so.
you
Let's
know,
hope so.
that's
Let's hope this is just the start.
This is just the
That's
start.
the start. It's sorely needed. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us on to our 8th story. Recently, 15th of July, World Youth Skills Day. Of course, this is a huge thing here in the Gambia where we say we have a lot of unskilled youth, but we also have some skilled ones. Have a look.
The challenges is just too much. It's just way too much. Like we struggle to learn this thing, but for us to benefit ourselves, it's the problem. Financially, for us to stand on our own.
Speaking ahead of the Transforming Education Summit scheduled for September, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, in commemoration of World Youth Skills Day, says, and I quote, "Young people are drivers of change and must be fully engaged in decisions affecting their future. Guided by the United Nations Youth 2030 strategy, I urge everyone to act for youth skills development as a priority at the summit and beyond."
We heard our colleague Jennifer Sonko there telling us about Guterres saying that youth should be involved. Mr. Mboj, are you aware of many countries where people involve youth in the decision-making process about what is going to affect them? I certainly know it does not happen here in the Gambia.
Yeah,
and I don't know many places where it does in Africa.
How can that be?
Yeah.
Surely you must have youth forums.
Sure.
They discuss. We all know that. I mean, it's not as if grown-ups were not youth once.
Once upon a time.
We did all of that.
Yeah.
So let us be careful here what we're talking about. I don't want to turn this youth into a kind of fetish. I've been saying this for a very long time.
Yeah.
We all know that the most potent force for change is youth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's it. So how do we use that?
Sure.
How, so that we can maximize whatever, get the most out of it. That's it. The schools, the training centers, they must be there. When I was in tertiary education a few years ago, we had about 73, I was told. I'm sure they've got more now.
Yeah.
Tertiary institutes.
Right.
But how do we train people? This is the key, because we also used to have workshops with
Right.
employers,
Sure.
potential. So we used to listen to them, what they were telling us about our products,
Yes,
as it
yes,
were. It's
yes.
important to have that interface, as they call it, so that we'll know how to train people. So what we used to get was more of the attitude.
Sure.
And you know,
Yeah,
it's
yes.
quite interesting.
Yeah.
I should be able to have the skill
Yes.
to do whatever, but I must be a reliable employee.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Mboj, because in us doing that report, we contacted certain young people who were in business, who were entrepreneurs, and we thought, you know, we couldn't bring all of them. So I decided to contact one of them, and I thought, okay, what's the contact they have out there? They have a beautifully designed Facebook page. They don't have a website, but they did have an email address, and they have a telephone number. And I wanted to chat to them ahead of us coming to discuss this, because I wanted to ask them some questions. They didn't answer all day yesterday. So I sent them a very rude letter. I said, you know, we were going to interview you for QTV. I said, but this is your face to the world. I said, you have a beautifully designed Facebook page. I said, but you have a telephone number saying, contact us on this number. I said, and none of you can be bothered to answer it. How serious are you about doing business? And do you think I will recommend anybody to you? I said, you guys need to get real. Just before we came and did this program, they contacted me, apologized, and sent 2 different numbers. And I wrote back saying, well, why are these not the numbers on your page? You know, so yes, we can say we want to do all this for the youth and so on, but they need to be serious themselves and plan properly. That putting the right number, that's a no-brainer. I'm not sure anybody needs to tell you. You're saying this is how you can contact us. Well, okay, I just tried and tried and tried and tried. So they had a part to play as well.
How many times have we discussed it here? We said that when we listen to civil society organizations and NGOs and all of these people, it appears to me they tend to focus more on, oh, these are our rights.
Yeah.
Our rights, that's our rights, that's our rights. I do not see that many programs on the responsibilities. We talk about the youth dividend, whatever, and there's another word, the youth quake.
Yes, yes.
That revolution that should come from youth.
Yes.
When we are invited to meetings, they are not any different from what we are, the grown-ups.
Yeah.
Everything starts late.
Yes, is that?
So it's simple stuff. It's really very simple stuff.
Yeah.
Can I be not like that?
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
So youth must also go and reflect.
Sure.
And say, okay, all of these things that we condemn in the grown-ups and people running
We're
things,
not going to do.
how can we be different?
How can we be better?
How can we improve it?
Sure,
Absolutely.
sure.
That is really, for me, the only point why I will condemn anything. When I condemn it, or I'll try to not be it,
I'll be better, better
I'll
than
be
it.
better than that.
Thank you for that. We've only got 5 minutes. We've got 2 more stories, Mr. Mboj, so let's get cracking, shall we? This weekend sees the semi-finals of the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, and I tell you, I've been watching from day one, and it's been fantastic. Who's made it to the Final 4? Have a look. Now we know the Final 4. They are Morocco, Zambia, South Africa, and Nigeria. Both semi-finals are on Sunday, with South Africa taking on Zambia at 5 p.m., followed by host Morocco locking horns with Nigeria at 8 p.m. Some exciting clashes await us. I can guarantee you some exciting clashes await us, Mr. Mboj. As I said, I've watched from day one. You know, in the quarterfinals, you had Nigeria playing Cameroon. Cameroon have never even scored against Nigeria in this competition. And so I guess we knew Nigeria were going to win that one. But having said that, they hadn't looked very good, even though they are defending champions, Nigeria, and they've won the damn thing 11 times. They're going for a 12th title. And in fact, if they win it, it'll be 10 in a row. For some reason, Equatorial Guinea had interrupted Nigeria's constant winning of this. But then you have South Africa, who have looked very good. And of course, you have the hosts, Morocco. They've looked amazing. And of course, they've been driven by the amazing crowd. Fantastic.
Absolutely. The fact that we are having this tournament in itself.
Yes, indeed.
You know, the women's stuff.
Sure.
So I was just thinking, whilst you were talking, I said, shame on me. I haven't really watched anything. If it had been the men's game,
sure,
I would have been doing it.
Yes.
So
and I'm glad you mentioned that,
yes.
because I'm
Shame
going
on
to
me.
shame our sportsman as well. He hasn't watched a single, and he presents a sports program here on QTV. And I've said to him, you have missed a fantastic. I said, if it was the men's game, you would have watched every single one. I said, the skill level has been high. Everything has been good about it, and you know, for you to comment on it, you need to watch it.
Absolutely.
And so I'm saying to everybody else, please watch over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I go, I hope to next we're going to have the semi-finals. Is it?
Semi-finals this weekend,
this weekend,
on Sunday,
and then afterwards,
and then the final.
Really, shame on me. I've got this sort of blindness. I'm not sure what to call it. So
but we need to watch it.
We need to watch it. And
thank you. And who knows, maybe Gambia will qualify the next time. And that takes us on to our final story, Mali. Oh, Mali. Mali was a country that for many years was a model of democracy, and then it all went upside down. Have a look.
In February 2022, France announced the withdrawal of their troops after a 9-year deployment fighting jihadists in Mali's north. In the wake to calm tension in Mali, Malian government on Thursday said it will suspend troops rotations by the UN peacekeeping mission in its territory. A statement by the government says the suspension will last until a meeting is held to facilitate the coordination and regulation of the rotation of these contingents. But the statement provided no date for the meeting. Political analyst Bakary Samt believes Mali's only chance of returning to political stability is through a process of national reconciliation.
A process of national reconciliation. I mean, Mr. Mboj, that is kind of pie in the sky stuff. I know we don't have much time for this particular story, but what's happened in Mali in this week alone has been quite shocking. One of the reasons why they decided to suspend rotation is that some troops from Ivory Coast landed there and were arrested and accused of not being UN troops but mercenaries. And unbelievably, the UN couldn't actually verify that they were UN troops. And so in the midst of all this chaos, Mali said, you know what, we don't give a damn. We're arresting them. They're still in detention. And I think 49 of them. And they have suspended. I mean, as I said, Mali used to be this country that was a kind of model of democracy for a long time. But now, rather sadly, it's kind of jihadist incursions and so on. It's a basket case almost.
Absolutely. The sort of the incongruities, quite interesting there. They want a national reconciliation there. Yes, I wonder how would Modibo Keita feel now?
Sure.
The first one. So this is the crisis of governance.
Sure.
There is no trust. The paranoia.
Yeah.
Sure. So we're really going through these things, really. So for how long? It's been the similar crisis that we've had on the whole continent.
Indeed.
Isn't it?
Microcosm of that.
Microcosm of that, isn't it? So what next? Can we have great leaders now emerging? Because certainly it seemed like a vacuum, as it were.
Sure.
Who would be the next leader? What can we do next? This is extremely difficult. Does anybody have any ideas? What to do? Any solutions? I do not know, Ade.
End it there, Mr. Mboj. Thank you. And I have to say, time has defeated us. And so just leave for me to say, for those who've been watching, thank you for watching. And if you've enjoyed it, tell others to watch. Until the next time, goodbye.